Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Kobe Lambeth. With me are Joshua Birch, Isha Zing from Racing with Isha, and Edward Hunter from Formula E Zone for the first time in 2024. Grid Live Wrap Up is back on the air. So great to see everyone back for the first race weekend recap of the year.
Yes, Kobe, it's great to be back. And while I enjoyed the break the past few weeks, I'm really eager to get back and just see what's in store for us across all the motorsport racing series.
Josh
Oh,
Ed?
sorry, am I next? Or is it Josh? I thought you were going next, Josh. But yes. Anyway, yes, it's great to be back talking about Formula E and also with Grid Network, who are always big fans of. I know everyone else at Formula E Zone, where I work, they're preparing for their big Monday night show at 8 p.m. UK time, where they're going to do a sort of essentially a kind of radio call-in show via their Discord server, where they're trying to get as many people in to talk about the race and everything around it as possible to sort of drum up some interest for that. So this is my plug for that, getting that out of the way. And great to be here once again with this guy over here. Just trying to figure out where I is, because I thought I was going to point at the wall for a second there. But yes, so I'm really excited to get into it. It's been a long off season, for Formula E especially, which is the main one I talk about. But yeah, I think just great to be coming gradually out of the winter and seeing the racing all start up again, because we haven't just got Formula E, but Daytona coming up fairly soon as well.
I'm back. Sorry. The internet still being the same old pain as it normally is. Yeah, delighted to be back on the wrap-up shows and the previews, and of course, Grid Tonight with you, Kobe. Great to be back with Isha, and of course, already worked with Ed yesterday on the E-Prix. Just great to be back. Great to be talking about racing. It was a long December and very much out of the winter of discontent and back in to motorsport madness. Absolutely love it, and I'm very, very grateful to be back on the show as well.
Yeah, grateful to have everyone back. For me, it feels like it's been a very short off season that lasted about 3 weeks long, because here we are back in 2024. And of course, before we get started with our Formula E program, want to give a big thank you to our Patreon supporters, Colin, Mark, Deshelle, Robin, David, and Matthew. Your monthly investment means so much to us and everyone on the team. If you want to expand to more trackside coverage in 2024, invest in the Grid Network today, or consider a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee or right here on YouTube. Super Chat, if you're watching us live, click the thank you button. If you're watching the recording, you can contribute to a particular person here on the air. We'll mention the message and I'll thank you here on the air. And the simplest way you can just show your support is to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And right now we're less than 200 subscribers away from getting to that iconic number of 1,000. Get Grid Network over 1,000 as soon as possible. So Isha, seeing we're getting close to the 1,000 mark. It's a big year for all of us here at Grid Network, a big year for the Grid Endurance performances at Grid Ranking and Formula E, especially for Tag Heuer Porsche and Pascal Verline.
Yes, Kobe, absolutely. Now, the Mexico City E-Prix is becoming Pascal Verline's best race. He has had 3 podium finishes with not a chance given to anyone else. Now, in the last 3 years here, he has had 3 podiums with a second place finish last year, and this year, as well as 2022, he won the race. Now, last year, Verline earned 3 wins and 4 podiums, and he almost finished every race in the points minus Cape Town. So, Ed and Josh, here's the first question for you guys. Was this an early statement that Verline can be a championship contender? And what can you share about the post-race investigation?
Thanks, Isha. So obviously, it was a very, very strong performance from Pascal Verline, and it was interesting because he has that history at Mexico City where he nearly won dramatically in his very first season of Formula E with Mahindra in season 5 before being narrowly pipped at the line by Lucas Di Grassi and then getting a post-race penalty anyway for cutting the chicane. Then he won in season 8, as you say, was second last year, and he was sort of snuck in there in the qualifying phase, was able to sneak into the duels, unlike his teammate Antonio Felix da Costa, and came out on top against the more fancied runners at Jaguar and, of course, Sebastian Buemi in the Envision, who lined up alongside him. And it was a very, very strong performance. We were a little bit worried at first. As I think we seem to have lost me, but here's the results. So, yeah, we were a little bit worried at first for Pascal because there was an early safety car right after he went into attack mode, which was, of course, the extra power boost sort of mode that you get a limited usage of. But once you activate it, the time counts down and you only get to use it for that limited amount of time. So we thought he had wasted it, but in the end, it turned out attack mode actually ended up being more of a disadvantage, and all the teams were desperate to sort of get it out of the way so that it would benefit their strategy later on. They wouldn't be spinning the rear wheels, losing traction, and just wasting energy. So that was how that went. And I think Pascal, it was, to be honest, a fairly comfortable victory for him, and similar to Jake Dennis's performance here last year, where he also won fairly comfortably. And then we had a message pop up in the middle of the race for both the Porsche powered cars of Pascal Verline and Jake Dennis, who of course drives for Andretti, which is powered by a Porsche Powertrain. And what we found out later, I was reading up on this today, was that apparently they were being investigated for traction control, essentially. There's been a lot of rumors towards the back end of Gen 2 and the beginning of this generation of Formula E car that some of the teams have been trying to create a sort of mock version of traction control that acts as basically a launch control for the start of the race. Because these electric cars have got that instant torque, it's very, very hard to control. They want to minimize wheel spin. And so they're using it to make sure their launch off the line is as clean as possible. And obviously at Mexico, you always see a load of smoke as everyone's doing burnouts before the start of the race as they're going into their grid slot. But yeah, it was certainly a very good start from Pascal, and there were worries that he might lose the victory because of this. But in the end, after a 4-hour meeting with Porsche, they were able to convince the stewards and disprove any rumors that they were using any kind of traction control system. So, and it was the same for Jake Dennis as well. He was cleared. Norman Nato, I think, was briefly under investigation, but I think they realized his start was nowhere near good enough to have any benefit from launch control of any kind. So that was dismissed mid-race. And yeah, so I think, is Pascal Wehrlein a championship contender? I think absolutely, but we've been here before last year, so he needs to not just do it in the first few races where he's finishing on the podium. He needs to qualify well throughout the season and get as many points as he can. And we saw Cape Town, you mentioned last year, the only race he didn't score any points in. He crashed out of that race, and that was really where the championship started to slowly ebb away from him from that point. His momentum kind of ebbed away, and it went the way of Jake Dennis and the Jaguar-powered drivers as well. So I think Pascal needs to keep that up, and that consistency is going to be very, very difficult to maintain throughout the season. But certainly, he seems a different man this season. I'm not sure if you agree, Josh. He had a kid, he had a child in the off season. There's a lovely picture on, I think, his Twitter account of his child, like seeing him winning the race, and his daughter, I think, is just going up to the TV and saying, "Oh, there's Daddy on the podium." So that's really nice, and he definitely seems a more confident and relaxed mood, which is good to see. And I imagine this win is going to help a great amount with that.
Yeah, we saw in the post-race, just getting out of the car, he knelt down to the camera and touched the top of his helmet, and there was a little handprint on the top of his helmet as well, presumably from his child that's just been born, as well, as you say. And it was just a little bit of a wholesome moment. And even in preseason testing, he looked like Pascal Verline had improved. Porsche last year losing out to the title to a customer team when they're the manufacturer wasn't something that they were happy about. So this year they wanted to hit the ground running. They were good in testing and they were strong in the race. Now, I had Buemi down as my pick a winner, and I had Verline down to win the title. So I was very pleased when they lined up 1-2 on the grid, but not in the right order. So I lost down on Buemi getting a pick a winner, but we'll talk more about that later on in the show. But definitely, I've thought since preseason testing, and certainly coming into Mexico as well, that Verline could be in the title hunt. Delighted that he had the perfect weekend, pole position with 3 points, plus then the 25. Then getting rid of the traction control penalty that was looming over him, meaning that he didn't have a third race taken away from him in Mexico, one in Puebla, and one, of course, when he ran out of energy at the line, and Degrassi got across him a few seasons ago. So great for Verline to leave here with 28 points, going into the double interior, where last year he was spectacular. So there's nothing stopping him repeating that form in 2 weeks' time. And there's nothing, again, going in to Sao Paulo when we go into March, because there's no race in February. So there's a lot of energy that Pascal needs to carry with him in the first 3 races before the month break, before he then return in March. So it's, again, a good start is crucial for him, and he's hit the ground running as Ed said, to continue that form throughout the season, needs to keep with a good mental game. I think he's got it. And I cannot lie to you all, says Canes Cat's Heat as well. That race made me realize why IndyCar is the best. Yeah, it wasn't the greatest start. He says, I fell asleep a few times watching that race. I think I can count with one hand how many overtakes there was. I think I can too, actually. There wasn't that many, minus the attack mode. Adam, who's in the commentary box with me and Ed as well, says Jay Dennis and Nominator will be contenders this season. Everyone's holding on with Nato and Dennis as well. We'll get more to that later in the show when we talk about the Andrettis.
Definitely, and now, as we all know, Verline took the pole and led the majority of the race. However, he did briefly lose it on attack mode. Now, Sebastian Buemi started second, stayed in second, and looked like the Buemi of old. His teammate outperformed him last season, with his last win being the 2019 New York City E-Prix. So Josh, starting with you on this one, are you confident that Buemi can return to the top step of the podium this year?
Absolutely. I mean, in testing, he seemed to have finally got that in vision where he wanted to. He left Nissan because he wasn't competitive anymore. He didn't like the team. They fell out. A lot of problems there. Went to Envision. Didn't have a great first season, but this second season as well in Gen 3 seems to have got it all together. He seems to be a lot more relaxed in the team. I mean, he was telling David Coulthard in the car yesterday on the way back to the podium about how he's 37. Look, there he is, finishing in second position. But he did so well, and compared to his teammate Robin Frijns, who didn't go off the line well because there was a problem with the launch, well, not the launch controls, but the launch system wasn't synchronized. So as soon as they hit the accelerator from zero as well, a hard hit down, the car just didn't stick and effectively went into an anti-stall that you see in a normal road car. So a lot of work for them to do there to get the power back, but perfect weekend for Buemi finishing in P2 there. And I definitely think that he can go a step further and take a race win. More likely we'll see him in race winning forms on track that he does well at later on in the season when we hit back in the Europeans.
Yeah, I think it's likely that we'll see him finish on the podium and go towards the front. Qualifying has always been a real strength of Buemi. He took, when he went to Envision, he took those 2 pole positions last year in, I think, Diriyah and Berlin. So certainly the powertrain underneath him, because it's not significantly different apart from some software updates from last year. It's the hardware is homologated from season 9 last year into season 10 this year. So the Envision, we saw how strong it was in the hands of Nick Cassidy, who's moved over to the factory Jaguar team and, of course, finished on the podium just behind them, which I think we're going to talk about in just a moment. But yeah, Buemi, it was interesting on the radio. They sort of told him, "Oh, just sort of stick behind and keep under consuming," I think was the message they sent when Pascal retook the lead off of him. And it looked a little bit like the safety car had helped, but Buemi still had that another attack mode that you had to go into, which is why Pascal Verline was able to retake the lead and then never really look back. So you get the sense that when Porsche ran an investigation, Buemi sort of thought to himself, well, rather than risking running out of energy at the end, I'll just hang behind and hope that Verline gets a penalty or a disqualification that bumps me up a place. But I think it was interesting because Cassidy looked a lot stronger than him in the second phase of the race, but could not find a way through. So I think Buemi has still got a few things to improve on, and we haven't quite seen the best of Robin Frijns yet, who had a bit of a messy first race back with his old Envision team. But yeah, I think there are good signs for Buemi. He needs to keep that up and again stay consistent. But I think he'll take a lot of positives out of this, and it certainly puts Envision, the reigning teams champions, in good stead in their sort of teams championship defense going into 2024.
Definitely, and while Buemi and Verline were up front, their teammates did face some issues. Now, Antonio Felix da Costa will be given a grid penalty for the next race. Robin Frijns had a slow start and crashed out of the race, so Jaguar is second in the team's championship, with both Nick Cassidy and Mitch Evans scoring points. Now, Ed and Josh, considering your thoughts on Wednesday's pre-race segment and today's show, have you changed your opinions on where Porsche, Jaguar, and Envision stand?
I'm going to say not really, Isha, because I did predict both Jaguar and Porsche to be strong, and lo and behold, they were both running towards the front. Although I think a lot of people expected Jaguar to dominate, and that didn't quite play out. So that would probably be the obvious surprise. I think da Costa was very, very poor, in my opinion, in Mexico City, that he qualified abysmally around the field and then made some sort of a clumsy move on Nico Muller, or as Formula E's own Twitter account auto-corrected when they were typing out the tweet. They called him Nico Mullet, which I thought was hilarious. But yeah, poor Nico carried on with a pretty damaged car. Like the back end looked like it was barely hanging together, but he was able to at least finish the race and not last as well. I think Dan Ticktum had an even worse race with the ERT car, sadly for him. But yeah, I think Da Costa he'll learn from that and hopefully come back stronger, because he's had a whole year to bed in with the Porsche team. Had that brilliant race in Cape Town, but otherwise he was nabbing a few podiums here and there, but he never quite was able to build enough momentum to put a title tilt together. And it's a shame, because Da Costa, we know exactly how good he is. Season 6 Formula E champion, one of the most dominant champions in that year as well, won it with a couple of races to spare. So whereas usually it almost always goes to the wire, to the final race or final weekend at the very least in Formula E. So I think Da Costa's got some work to do. Robin Freins, it was a weird one. I don't know what you think on it looking back, Josh, but he made a terrible start off the grid, was slowly fighting his way back up the order, putting one of the few overtakes that we saw in the race, and was fighting. I think he'd just gotten ahead of Eduardo Mortara in the Mahindra who had gone into attack mode, I think, offline. And then as he was getting past him, went a bit over the curve. There's a bit of surface change as they exit the Forest Stadium. Freins got on the curb, started to lose it, and then just was sent sideways into the wall. And I think I remember Sam Bird doing a very, very similar thing, I think back in season 6 in 2020, early in that season as well. So it has happened before. It is easy to be caught out there, but Robin Freins, renowned for his car control, is a very uncharacteristic error. And a lot of people have said they got flashbacks to last year when Robin broke his hand. Thankfully, his hand was okay on this occasion. But yeah, I think both of them need to up their game if they want to help their team in respective teams of Envision and Porsche in the team's championship. Because as you say, Jaguar have got 2 really, really big stars in Evans and Cassidy, who you can be almost certain are going to be, at least 1 or 2 of them are going to be scoring big points every weekend that Formula is around. So yeah, I think that's really all I've got to say.
Yeah, Jaguar, of course, having a fantastic opening race. The only one of those top 3 teams to actually score with both drivers, I thought was fantastic. Cassidy v Evans, though, was sort of the battle we were looking at in the early stage of the race before the safety car, when everyone was still mucking around with attack modes. The safety car sort of did spoil the race, looking back, as you said, Ed, in the commentary yesterday. It was a race very much of 3 halves. We had the first half when everyone was using attack mode and deciding whether we wanted to lead or not. I mean, in the first 11 laps, we had 4 lead changes between Verline and Buemi, which was all because of the attack modes. Then after the safety car, we had Verline take the lead from lap 12 onwards and led until lap 37. So that needs to change. I don't think this track, the current layout, is suitable for Formula E racing. It's ever since they changed it up and they added the 5-6 hairpin and then they re-added the 9-10 chicane, it hasn't worked. It's like they've tried to combine every version of the track we had, and it's just not giving us the good racing. If you think about it, last year, the season opener, there wasn't that many overtakes. This year there wasn't. I don't know if that's a Gen 3 problem, but I would be much happier racing on the oval section with the Forest. That, to me, I think was a very interesting layout, and it provided the slipstream runs, and it was just a little bit more entertaining than this constant seems to stop-start without proper overtaking zones. I think going forward this season, we're going to see it be Porsche v Envision with Jaguar always on their heels. I think that's certainly what I got after the first race. We're just going to see if anybody else can catch up. Certainly, I'm expecting Andretti Global to catch up after their poor weekend, but we'll talk about that in the very next question.
Well, can I pick you up on something, Josh? Because I think you have identified the problem with Mexico, but I think you may have slightly misdiagnosed what the cause of the problem was.
Oh, was it?
I really think it's the Gen 3 cars that they've not...
Right.
They just don't see. It was ever since last year when they were introduced. It was their debut race, and we said at the time it had its moments, but it was a lot of the moments were because of teams still, getting to grips with the Gen 3 format. We've had a whole season of that now, so the teams are on top of it. They know exactly when to go into attack mode. They know the slipstream is not that powerful in Mexico, so basically, if you stay stuck behind someone, it's very, very hard to overtake if you qualify badly. I mean, Pascal Verline said after the race, well, it was good to have a Formula E race where qualifying at least mattered for a change. But I think the knock-on effect of that is that it means people who just tune in for the race itself may come away a little bit disappointed, because all the action in that race was basically in those first 6 laps or so for the majority of it, when they were all trying to dump and get through attack mode as quickly as possible. And certainly there were 1 or 2 little surprises in, like I say, some of the drivers that made mistakes and messed up essentially. But yeah, I can understand people who thought the second half of the race was a little bit of an anticlimax. I think there's things that Formula E can do next time we go to Mexico, especially with the Gen 3 Evo, I think, coming in, which is the next iteration of this Gen 3 car, while they're sorting out the rule set for the next phase, which is Gen 4 in a few years' time. But yeah, so I think that will be interesting to see if Mexico is any more exciting with those change-ups, because I think Formula will be very conscious of this and looking to spice up the show a bit.
Yep, definitely. And now if we take a look at the defending drivers champion, we have Jake Dennis, who did not have a stellar start. Dennis finished 9th and Norman Nato took 10th, only earning 3 points for Andretti. So were you too surprised that Andretti didn't show more pace? Josh, starting with you.
I generally was. I was a bit worried in qualifying when Dennis just couldn't get through. And there was a yellow flag out, I think, as well on his lap, wasn't there? That a phantom yellow appeared at the chicane, and it was a bit difficult for him to get through. He started, of course, down 14th on the grid, made his way back up into 9th place. His teammate, Norman Nato, started 13th on the grid. He finished behind in 10th place, the final points paying position. But I think that the two Andrettis had very much an off weekend, and it was disrupted from qualifying. It was a good fight back in a difficult race, but going forward, I expect them to come out all guns blazing in Diriyah in 2 weeks' time. If they don't, then I think then they're in a lot of trouble, because to have a bad start to the season and then after Diriyah have a month's break before Sao Paulo, it's not good for the mental health of the team to say, okay, we didn't perform in the first 3 races. Now we've got 3 more races before we're back in Europe, and we've got to try and find something going forward. It's a lot to do. It's a lot to try and sort of fight back going into it.
I've got to be honest, I think because they got their laps completely held up in qualifying, and qualifying ended up having such a huge impact on the final result here, I think it was a bit of an anomalous result, really, because Dennis was saying we had like 2% more energy left than the people around us, but we just couldn't get through because we were stuck in that train. There was a whole train of cars stuck behind Mitch Evans from sort of 5th place onwards, which Verne was really struggling, and Dennis was sort of behind Jake Hughes and Stoffel Van Dorn in that sort of pack there, with Norman Nato and then Oliver Rowland in tow as well. So it was a bit unfortunate. Also, Jake Dennis said we knew it was going to be difficult to overtake, so they were making all the moves. I think he made like 3 or 4 moves really, really early on in the race in those sort of first couple of laps or so. There was one on Sam Bird, I think was missed on the stream, that was very, very good as well, where he was able to sneak through there. It might have been with attack mode as well, but I don't remember, because I think Dennis and Norman Nato especially didn't use attack mode at all until quite late in the race. And so they were gaining ground early on because other people had to use it and then were struggling under traction. And then they had to use it and they ended up suffering the effect. So it's a little bit like in Formula One, where if you have one tyre compound that's way faster than the others, and eventually, because you have to use 2 different compounds of tyres, you have to use the bad tyre at some point in the race and just get it out of the way before switching back to the more favourable compound and setting better lap times. So yeah, it was one of those things. I don't think Andretti would be panicking too much, because at the very least, Norman Nato was right with Jake Dennis on the pace throughout this race. And I think that's positive, given his previous teammate, Andre Lotto, who's now the test driver for Porsche. He had a lot of races last year where he basically qualified really badly and never recovered, while Jake Dennis was, fighting for and eventually winning that Drivers' Championship. So I don't think the team is in anywhere near as bad state as some people might initially assume on seeing that result. I think it's going to end up being anomalous. There's clearly performance in the powertrain, as we even saw with Pascal Verline dominating up front pretty much. So I think there's still more to come on this story, and I think they'll probably go a lot better and get more points to their name in Saudi Arabia.
Definitely. And now to take a quick look at some stats from the race. Only 18 drivers were able to finish the race. The biggest mover was Oliver Rowland, who was up 9 positions from 20th to 11th place. Now, Jake Dennis moved up 5 positions, the most of any driver that finished in the point standings. There were only 2 drivers that started in the top 10 who finished outside the top 10. So, Ed, starting with you, did the Mexico City E-Prix live up to your expectations?
Well, my expectations going in, and I think I told you this on stream, that I thought Pascal Verline was going to run away with it. And so we had a little battle for the lead early on in the first 6 or 7 laps that I did. As on a strategic level, I did enjoy. I think, like I said, the race never really came alive. I think another thing that really didn't help in the UK, at least, is that we had a lot of changes to the broadcast coverage, and maybe Josh might have more to say on this. But I felt it was a little bit thrown together and chaotic in a way that I think we were not up to the usual standards that I think we'd gotten used to. And what really doesn't help as well is that Formula E in the UK has disappeared a bit behind a paywall, where people are having to pay, what is it, £30 a month. So that's like 3 times a single Netflix subscription to watch TNT Sports and their Formula E coverage, where a lot of sessions are interrupted by ads, and they're not even thrown to ads. It's literally just, it might be mid-sentence in a practice session while the commentator's speaking, they'll cut to ads and then just come back again mid-sentence. So the coordination is not especially positive there. And somebody said to me yesterday, it feels like even Formula E doesn't care about how Formula E is broadcast anymore. And arguably it's been patchy in several countries over the years as well. But I think the overwhelming comments you were getting about the race were negative, and I think because there wasn't too much to write home about in terms of a close race at the front with Pascal controlling it, the conversation inevitably turned to sort of criticisms of the coverage. I think some of them are a little harsh, but others I think are definitely things that they need to work on in terms of their presenting team, getting them to gel a bit better, because a lot of them, without wanting to name names, felt like they were floundering or didn't have a whole lot to add, to be honest. 1 or 2 did a very good job though. And I think hopefully with they have a bit more experience under their belt, the newbies in the broadcast team presenting it will find their feet, but we'll have to see.
We stayed in the group chat after the commentary yesterday, all of us, and we were having a discussion for like 30, 45 minutes or so, and we were talking about the broadcast as well. I mean, from our side, commentating, it was no different. We were all right. Once we started our show, we were right back into the groove of it. But we're experienced. We know how each other react in the commentary. We know when to jump in with each other, like on this broadcast. You might notice we do have a script, but sometimes we can tell what each other's thinking just by a look, and it's easy then to have the. Well, yeah. Sometimes if Isha needs to speak or something or other, we can give a look and she'll know that we've finished talking, and then me and Kobe as well, we have the same thing. And it's something that you develop over time with broadcast partners. You can understand mannerisms and you can get a communication going. It's very new, the TNT Sport team. They've got a new production with Whisper coming in, replacing North One. Aurora Media still doing the world feed of the sessions. So it'll take time for it all to bake together very nice and get it all well and truly done with the cherry on top. But I must admit, there were a few bits in the broadcast before we started our coverage that I was going, that's not good, because we had hosts that were unaware that they were on camera, looking down at their iPad, typing things. We had them going like that with their noses as well. One of them, I even swear I saw putting their mobile phone directly behind them in their pocket. It's just that's camera direction that needs work on as well, and earpieces to have communication to the gallery. So there's a few bits that can be turned around. So to me, the production side wasn't up to it. I thought Tom Brooks, though, did an absolutely outstanding job. A brilliant commentator as well. Really enjoyed him. Ryan as well, the same with the CBS commentary. I've been able to hear some of that. He was top dollar as well as they moved to integrate that for the American viewers. And I thought it was really good commentary-wise. There's a few that need work. The racing itself, as Ed said, if it was more exciting, they wouldn't be talking about all the problems with the production. It wasn't that great. I get carried away in the commentary box, so I was loving every second of it, especially in the early stage, dancing up and down, enjoying that racing was back. Thinking back on it now the next day, I can see the problems. I understand where things need to be improved upon for Diriyah. It probably will be. And hopefully it's the first race. Things will get better after. Never judge a championship by its first race, because if we did that, half of the Formula One seasons that turned out to be classics, we would have written off the first race. 2010 springs to mind when we were at Bahrain. It was so bad that everyone called it Bahrain. And then by the time we got to Australia, all hell broke loose and the championship was fantastic. So it just give it time. Like I say every year, it'll get back into the swing of it and we'll have a good year. Oh, and Adam agrees. It was good to be with Josh and Ed for the season opener yesterday. It's good to have you as well, Adam, on the broadcast.
Is that the look, Josh? Now it's my turn to talk.
Yeah, if I just smile like that.
No, just kidding. But you're definitely right. It is something that you pick up on over time. But anyways, taking a look now at an ex-Formula One driver. In his first race back in Formula E, Nick De Vries went from 22nd to 15th place, while Eduardo Mortara went up 2 positions to 13th. So Josh and Ed, is this a good enough start for the rebuilding Mahindra?
Qualifying could have been better. De Vries was off the pace all weekend long. In FP2, he was the only driver outside of a second to the rest of the field, who was separated by about 9 tenths off the top of my head. So there's improvements that he needs to catch back up to driving a Formula E car. Don't forget, he's been out of a car effectively since, where were we? Where did he get kicked out?
He didn't get kicked out. He went to Formula One, Josh.
No, I'm on about when he got kicked out of Formula One the last time he drove a car. Where was it? I can't remember off the top of my head. What race was it?
It was British Grand Prix, I think, was
British Grand Prix. Right. Okay, so that's since July. That's 6-7 months ago now. So, and they did testing, only got a session before the car sort of caught fire. And then he got only about 2 hours extra session. So he's had half the practice time of everybody else. So I wasn't expecting much, but it was impressive to see him fight back up, as you say, into 15th from 22nd on the grid, arguably helped by the fact that 4 cars retired. For going further on as well, it was interesting that Eduardo Mortara only made up 2 places to 13th. I did expect more from Mortara, as he's had a generation in this car. De Vries hasn't. He hasn't raced in Gen 3. So I'm a bit surprised by Edo. I'm hopeful he'll get back up to it. But Mahindra, very much a team that are, I wouldn't say struggling, but they're definitely uneasy coming into season 10.
I think I might disagree with you a little bit on this, Josh, because I wasn't expecting anything from Mahindra. I think they had one of the worst powertrains. They were second last ahead of only their customer team ACT in last season's championship. So I actually think they did about as well as could have been expected. So I feel like Nick De Vries obviously jumping back in, finished the race down in 15th, but still at least got some experience under his belt, because he's not really driven a whole lot of these Gen 3 cars, because he was world champion in season 7 and then left Formula E at the end of season 8 for his abortive Formula 1 career, sadly. And as for Mortara, I think Mortara snuck out a pretty decent qualifying position and then gained a couple of places through retirements, which really is all that Mahindra is capable of at this phase. We know there's a long-term project that the team principal, Frederick Bertrand, is in the middle of. We know that it certainly doesn't involve AI influencers, because we know there was that story earlier in the week where the Ava Rose, the AI influencer that they made up for the team, was hurriedly deleted when they saw how unpopular it was, almost as if they invented it to distract from the fact that they knew their powertrain wasn't particularly good and they wanted to create a few different headlines other than, oh, Mahindra at the back. Because I know there are a lot of people who like to put the boot in, I guess, on Nick De Vries and were sort of said, Mexico City proves this weekend Pascal Verline dominated from the front. Oh, and also Nick De Vries finished a lowly 15th. And I was like, well, he's in one of the worst cars. So I think at this phase, just getting some more experience under his belt is a good thing. I don't think we can expect too much from Nick De Vries. Despite being a former champion, I think if you're in one of the worst cars, there's very little you can do. Just ask Dan Ticktum at a horrible race where basically they decided to hope for a safety car, hang back, save loads of energy, and they didn't get one, and they ended up almost being lapped as well. So I think no matter how good a driver you are, if your car is not up to snuff, not efficient enough, not quick enough, then you're in for a tough time at a circuit like Mexico where it's so difficult to overtake. But on the plus side, I think there are some other good stories that were going on, if I may go slightly off topic, like Jake Hughes finishing in the top 7 again for the second year in a row. I thought all the DS and Maserati cars did very well. Max Gunther in particular, getting that top 4, I thought was a great drive as well. So I think maybe we didn't focus too much on Maserati and DS, but I think they had a much stronger start to this season than they did last, where they were really struggling to get points.
Well, last year, Mortara ended up in the barrier at the first corner, and we were saying, well, what has happened? They were fastest of all in preseason testing, and we come here and they just didn't deliver. So definitely a better start for Maserati and for DS, who had similar powertrain issues to which we said about, we had Mark Preston in the commentary box last year, and I jokingly said to him, I bet you're glad you don't have the battery power this year of the DS, and he chuckled it off a little bit. But yeah, definitely a big improvement for them.
And now, before we continue on to our next segment, I believe we have a few comments in the chat room. So Kane's Cat's Heat says, it looks like qualifying could be the most important thing this season, like it was at the end of last season. Beginning of last season, the winners all came from P6 and below, Dennis and Pascal. And then Adam says, nice to see Nick Cassidy on the podium. Also, David Coulthard driving the podium finishers to the stage for the presentation. Another comment here, and we've got, and thoughts on Jehan, not the best start for him when his teammate qualifies in the top 5 and he qualifies last. Ed and Josh, any comments on these?
Well, Jehan Deruvala, the Indian driver moving over from Formula 2, is very much a rookie. I don't think expectations, again, were particularly high. I think he needed just to get some experience in an actual race under his belt. He finished, he stayed out of trouble, and P16... I don't think that's too bad in the scheme of things. And I think more laps, the more experience he gets under his belt in this car, which is not easy to pick up whatsoever, I think Jehan Deruvala will improve more and more. I know there are a lot of Indian fans very eager to see him succeed, especially since we don't have an Indian Formula E race on the calendar anymore with the cancellation of Hyderabad that was quite last minute a few weeks ago. But yeah, I think Jehan Deruvala can build on this, and I don't think seeing Gunther finishing P4, I don't think it's panic stations just yet. I think if Deruvala can score a couple of points, the further we get into the season, I think he'll be doing pretty well.
I've always been a fan of Jehan Deruvala as well from Formula 2. Great stuff as well he's done. Won a couple of races. There were a couple of times last year I criticised him, especially at Monaco. But he is a driver that does have some talent, and he will go. And I wouldn't put it past him winning a race at some point if he stays in Formula E.
That is bold, Josh.
I wouldn't put it past him. He's won a couple of Formula 2 and surprised us, and he's done some great driving. So certainly I'm going to say I wouldn't be surprised if he took a victory at some point in his Formula E career. But as Ed said, he's still very much a rookie. It's big difference going from a normal aspirated car to an electric race car. It's big difference.
Now, Ed and Josh, thank you so much for your thoughts and comments. Now it's time for our one shining moment. So we encourage everyone in the chat room to comment with your one shining moment. What stood out to you from this race weekend or something in the racing news? Ed, let's start with you.
I can go with 2. I think one of them is on track and the other is, I think, behind the scenes. I think in terms of the broadcast, I thought one of the new members in Formula E's coverage who did very well was James Rossiter. Funny, we were just talking about Maserati and Gunther and the other driver, Deruvala. But James Rossiter was former team principal for, I think, Maserati / Venturi / MSG Group. They seem to have gone through a lot of team principals, almost like it's become like a football team now, the amount they're churning through at the moment. But yeah, he was the team principal. Last year, they had a slightly difficult season, although they did win a race in Jakarta with Maximilian Gunther. And James Rossiter, of course, was a former test driver in Formula E as well. He's got experience even driving the Gen 3 in a few tests as well. I thought he gave some very good insight and was one of the broadcast members who I think shined the most. Unfortunately, some of the presenters who should have been taking the lead ended up leaning on him for knowledge and relying on him the most. That's probably why we got to hear so much of him. But I thought he did an excellent job whenever he was thrown to during the coverage. In terms of on track, I would say the shining performance I would go to, I think I might go for Jake Hughes. I think last year he finished again in the top 6 and I gave him my one shining moment to him. And I think I've got to give it to him again because we saw Sam Bird really struggle in this race, start just outside the top 10 and drop down to 14th by the end. But Jake Hughes, was able to get of all the Nissan powered cars, he got that McLaren into the top 7, got some big points for that team. And I think it's now his second season in the sport. So Jake Hughes is really going to be looking to build off what he learned in the first season, where we know there are a lot of races where he really struggled with energy management and made a couple of mistakes here and there, even though he showed very, very good pace, got a pole position last time he went to Deere as well. So I think Jake Hughes is looking in very, very good shape for the rest of season 10. And Sam Bird is really going to have to up his game a little bit, even though qualifying, McLaren just miscalculated when they sent him out. And he was, I think, a second or two off crossing the line to start a final flying lap that might have been enough to get him into the duels. But nonetheless, I think Jake Hughes doing everything right at the moment.
I love that comment from Ben saying, shout out to Pascal for getting me a pick a winner point. Someone screenshot the leaderboard because it's probably the only time I'll ever get to say I'm leading the standings. Yeah, somebody do it. I got the wrong order as well. I picked Buemi for the win in Mexico and Verline for the title. So I'm playing the long game. If now, Joe, Kobe, you're watching. Kobe's running the cameras. If Verline wins the title, I want double points, or 5. I want 5 because I've picked that before the first race and I've been saying it all year. If Verline wins the title, I want more points to pick a winner. Adam says one shining moment for him is just getting started in the 2024 motorsport year. I agree. That's one of my moments as well. I thought James Watson did a great job, actually. And I'm not bitter, but Formula E are just nicking all our ideas, aren't they, Ed? Because last year we did a watch along. This year they're endorsing a watch along. Last year in the first race we had a team principal who just left Formula E on the broadcast. This year they've had a team principal who's just left the team and is on their broadcast. They're just nicking all our ideas. So I look forward to when they eventually nick either me, Ed, or anybody else who appears on for their coverage. My one shining moment, I think, will be Sebastian Buemi, just because he was so delighted to be back on the podium and he had a good weekend. He actually took his P2 trophy with him to the post-race interview in the media centre, and I thought he just would not let go of it. So that's great to see that Sebastian Buemi's having a bit more energetic approach to this season, and he is looking like he could be back in form. And another personal one, just everything's back up and running. It feels very, very good to get back to work, and I've been working since Tuesday. And I've loved every single second of it. Usually I'd be bored and tired by now. But no, I'm very much energetic to be back. It's been great doing the podcast and the Grid Tonight show and then all the sessions and then back here with the wrap up. It is great to be back and I can't wait for more.
Those are some great shining moments, guys. And Josh, you're absolutely right. It feels great to be back and it's really exciting to see what the season has in store for us. And with that, I will now hand it over to Kobe for the closing of today's show.
Thanks, Isha. And on Wednesday, we're going to be back in the air for Grid Tonight. Lots of news already to cover. Extreme E and SRX series are both coming to an end. We'll have to see what's next for them. Plus, IMSA is going to see some big names from the IndyCar and NASCAR World Racing in a couple of weeks' time at Daytona. Bookmark our Grid Live pre-race show for the Rolex 24 at Daytona. You definitely don't want to miss our most anticipated show of the year. And then we'll switch to full gear with Grid Live Encore and the Women in Motorsports coming around the corner. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and visit our website, gridranking.com, throughout 2024 for all recaps of the races that are going on. For Isha Zine from Racing with Isha, Edward Hunter from Formula Zone, and Joshua Birch, I'm Kobe Lemon. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful week.